The Nazis built rockets. They built jets. But deep in a mine in Poland, they built something that wasn't a weapon of war. It was a weapon of physics. They called it Die Glocke, the bell. It didn't explode. It spun. It hummed. And when they turned it on, it didn't just kill people. It turned their blood into crystals. 60 of the top scientists in Germany died just testing it. It was too dangerous for this world. And then, in May 1945, it vanished. The general, the machine, and the research gone. This is the mystery of the Nazi bell. You have to understand the desperation. It's late 1944. The Third Reich is collapsing. The Allies are closing in from the west. The Soviets are steamrolling from the east, and German cities are burning. The war is mathematically lost, but the leadership in Berlin isn't acting like it. They aren't preparing for surrender. They are pouring billions of Reichsmarks into something else. They are obsessed with Wunderwaffen, wonder weapons. We all know about the V-2 rockets. We know about the jet fighters, but those were just the surface. Beneath the propaganda, there was a project so secret that even other high-ranking Nazis didn't know it existed. It was classified Kriegsentscheidend, decisive for the war. This wasn't just a bigger bomb. This was something that would rewrite the laws of reality. To understand the machine, you have to understand the man who built it. If you think you know the villains of World War II, you're missing the worst one. We all know Himmler, Goering, Goebbels, but the man holding the keys to the future was Hans Kammler. Kammler wasn't a politician. He was an architect, a civil engineer. He started his career designing buildings, but he found his calling in designing death. He was the man who designed the gas chambers at Auschwitz. He didn't just draw the blueprints, he optimized them for efficiency. He turned mass murder into an industrial process. He was cold, calculating, and absolutely brilliant. By 1944, Hitler gave Kammler total control over all advanced weapons projects. He had more power than the generals. He had an army of slave laborers at his disposal and a blank check from the Reich. And he took that power and went underground, literally. Kammler knew the Allies controlled the skies. He couldn't build his new weapons in factories that could be bombed, so he decided to carve a new empire inside the mountains of Lower Silesia in what is now Poland. He called it Project Ries. Ries means giant, and that is exactly what it was. If you go to the Owl Mountains today, you can still feel the coldness coming off the rock. The scale of what Kammler built there is impossible to wrap your head around. We aren't talking about a few bunkers. We are talking about 7 massive underground complexes, miles of tunnels reinforced with concrete, vast halls 30 feet high, carved out of solid stone. Thousands of prisoners from the Gross-Rosen concentration camp were brought here to dig. They worked until they dropped, and then they were replaced. The secrecy was absolute. The guards were SS, but even they weren't allowed in the inner sanctums. This wasn't a factory. You don't build cathedral-sized halls half a mile underground just to assemble rifles. The layout was strange. The tunnels didn't make sense for logistics. They were designed for shielding. Deep inside the Wenceslas mine, one of the primary sites of the Ries complex, there was a specific chamber. It was lined with ceramic tiles and heavy rubber mats. It was known as the Beehive, and sitting in the center of this room, chained to the floor, was the device. The scientists simply called it the bell. According to the few documents that survived, specifically the interrogation records of an SS officer named Jakob Sporenberg, the bell was heavy. It was made of a hard, dark metal, about 9 feet wide and 12 to 15 feet tall. It looked like a massive church bell, hence the name, but inside it was a nightmare of engineering.
It contained 2 lead cylinders, one inside the other. When the machine was active, these cylinders would spin in opposite directions at incredible speeds. They weren't spinning air. They were filled with a violet metallic liquid. The scientists had a code name for it, Xerum 525. This is where the story gets scientific and terrifying. Xerum 525 wasn't just fuel. It was a cocktail of instability. Descriptions say it looked like mercury, but it glowed purple. It was likely a mix of mercury, thorium, and beryllium peroxide. Mercury is heavy. It's a liquid metal. If you spin mercury fast enough, you can create plasma. You can create incredibly strong magnetic fields. But if you add radioactive isotopes like thorium into the mix, and you spin them in counter-rotating vortexes at thousands of revolutions per minute, you are doing something that standard physics gets very uncomfortable with. You are creating a torsion field. The idea was to create a shear in the fabric of space-time itself. This sounds like science fiction, but the Nazis were obsessed with this concept. They weren't trying to split the atom. They had already tried that and failed to build a bomb in time. They were trying to manipulate gravity. When the bell was activated, it required massive amounts of electricity. There was a dedicated power plant just for this one device. As the cylinders spun up, the bell would glow. A pale blue light would spill out of it. The sound was deafening, a heavy mechanical hum that vibrated through your chest. But the most frightening thing wasn't the noise. It was the field it generated. The bell wasn't safe. It was lethal. When they ran the first tests, they didn't know what would happen. They placed plants, animals, and insects inside the testing zone. The results were horrifying. Plants didn't burn. They didn't wither. They turned into a black, greasy goo. It was as if their molecular structure just fell apart. The chlorophyll disappeared, leaving behind a dead sludge. They tested it on animals, lizards, rats, mice. The effects were even worse. The water in their bodies would separate, the blood would thicken and gel, and then crystals would grow in the bloodstream. Sharp, geometric crystals would grow inside the organs, piercing the organs from the inside out. The animals died in agony. But it wasn't just the animals. The scientists were in the room. They wore protective gear, rubber suits, heavy helmets with red visors. It didn't matter. The radiation, or whatever the field the bell was projecting, went right through it. 5 of the original 7 scientists in the inner circle died during the initial testing phase. They didn't die from radiation poisoning in the normal sense. They complained of a metallic taste in their mouths. They lost their balance. They had trouble sleeping. And then their bodies just started to shut down. Hans Kammler didn't care. He replaced them. He brought in more physicists, more chemists. He ordered them to find a way to shield the device. They tried everything: lead, concrete, water. Nothing stopped the field completely. They discovered that the only way to run the machine without killing everyone instantly was to run it for short bursts, 1 minute, 2 minutes, then shut it down and scrub the room. The entire chamber had to be washed down with a saline solution after every test because the field left a residue on the walls. What were they trying to achieve? Some theories say they were building a propulsion system for a flying saucer. The Foo Fighters that Allied pilots reported seeing, glowing orbs that could outmaneuver any plane, might be the result of this technology. But others think it was darker. They think Kammler was trying to bend time. If you can warp gravity, you can warp time. Einstein proved that. If the bell generated a field strong enough to bend local gravity, it could theoretically create a bubble where time moved differently. Imagine the advantage. If you could move a weapon or a person outside of the normal flow of time, you would be invincible. You could strike before you were seen. You could change the outcome of a battle before it started. If you go to the site today, in the town of Ludwikowice Kłodzka, you can see a strange structure sitting on the surface right above the tunnels. Locals call it the fly trap. It looks like a modern Stonehenge. It's a ring of concrete pillars, 30 yards across, with a heavy circular rim on top. It's brutalist and ugly. Skeptics say it's just the base of a cooling tower for a power station, and maybe it is, but it's built like a fortress. The concrete is reinforced with steel thick enough to stop a tank shell, and there are high-voltage cables running directly from the power plant into the ground beneath it. The theory is that the bell was brought up here for full-scale testing. They would chain it to the center of the henge, tethered by thick steel chains, so it wouldn't tear itself loose from the earth when the anti-gravity field kicked in. The pilots who flew over the area reported strange lights, strange turbulence. The SS guarded this ring with their lives.
But by April 1945, the Red Army was miles away. The artillery was getting louder every day. The time for testing was over. It was time to run. This is where the story turns into a detective thriller. Kammler knew the war was over. He also knew he had the most valuable object on the planet. He wasn't going to let the Soviets have it, and he certainly wasn't going to let the Americans have it for free. He issued orders to the Special Evacuation Commando. This was a unit hand-picked for loyalty. Their job wasn't to fight. Their job was to erase. They went into the Risi complex. They rigged the tunnels with explosives. They collapsed the entrances. But before they did that, they had to deal with the loose ends. The loose ends were the scientists. These were the men who knew how the bell worked. They knew the formula for Xerum 525. They knew the frequency of the rotation. They were the smartest men in the Reich, and Kammler had them all executed. 62 scientists were rounded up. We don't know exactly how they died, but they were buried in mass graves near the complex. Kammler couldn't risk one of them talking to the Russians. He needed to be the only one who knew the secret. Then the bell itself was moved. Jakob Sporenberg, the SS general who was later captured and interrogated by the Polish War Crimes Commission, described the evacuation. He said the bell was loaded onto a massive truck. The Xerum 525 was packed into lead-lined containers. They drove to a nearby airfield. Waiting on the runway was a Junkers Ju 390. This was a massive 6-engine transport plane, one of the few aircraft capable of flying from Germany to South America without refueling. The bell was loaded on board. Kammler got on the plane. The engine started. And that is the last time anyone saw Hans Kammler or the Nazi bell in Europe. History tells us that Hans Kammler committed suicide. On May 9, 1945, he supposedly walked into the woods and shot himself, or he asked his aide to shoot him, or he took cyanide. The problem is, there are 4 different versions of his death, and there is no body. His family never saw a body. The Allies never found a grave. In the Nuremberg trials, Kammler was the only high-ranking Nazi general who was just missing. They didn't even try to prosecute him in absentia. It was like he had been deleted from the record. Why? Because you don't prosecute the man who has the time machine. You make a deal with him. We know about Operation Paperclip. We know the U.S. government brought Werner Braun and hundreds of other Nazi scientists to America to build the space program. They forgave their crimes because they needed their brains. But Kammler was different. Werner Braun built rockets. Kammler built the bell. There's a document from a U.S. counterintelligence corps agent named Donald Richardson. Years later, on his deathbed, he told his sons a secret. He said, "I brought Kammler to the United States." He claimed that Kammler surrendered to the Americans. He traded the bell and the remaining stockpiles of Xerum 525 for his life. The deal was simple. We get the technology, you get a new identity and freedom.
So where did the bell go? Fast forward 20 years. It's December 9th, 1965. We're in the small town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. It's a quiet evening. People are cooking dinner, watching TV. Suddenly, a fireball tears across the sky. It's seen from Michigan to New York. It's massive, trailing smoke, dropping sonic booms that rattle windows. This isn't a meteor. Meteors burn up high in the atmosphere. This thing is controlled. It's turning. It comes down low over the woods in Kecksburg. It crashes into the trees with a thud, not an explosion. Locals rush to the scene. A volunteer firefighter named James Romansky gets there first. He expects to see a plane crash. He expects to see burning wreckage, wings, a fuselage. Instead, he sees an object sitting in the dirt. It's not a saucer. It's not a plane. It's an acorn. It's bell-shaped. It's about 10 feet tall, 12 feet wide. It's made of a solid bronze-colored metal. There are no seams, no rivets, no wings. And around the base of the object is a band of strange writing. It looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics. Does that sound familiar? Within an hour, the military swarms the town, and we aren't talking about the local police. We're talking about the U.S. Army. They arrive in trucks, armed with Geiger counters. They declare martial law in the woods. They point guns at the locals and tell them to leave. They back a flatbed truck down the logging road. Witnesses watch from the shadows as the soldiers winch the object onto the truck. They cover it with a tarp, and then they speed away. The next day, the official story is released. It was a meteor, just a rock from space. Nothing to see here. But James Romansky knew what he saw. He saw the bell. The connection is almost impossible to ignore. The shape is identical. The size is identical. The hieroglyphics match the descriptions of the markings on the Nazi device. Did the U.S. military try to test the bell in 1965? Did they lose control of it? Think about the timing. 1965 is the height of the Cold War. If the Americans had the ultimate weapon, they would be testing it. Maybe they were trying to make it fly. Maybe the anti-gravity drive failed. Or maybe, just maybe, it arrived from somewhere else. Remember the time travel theory? If the bell was a machine that could warp space-time, who's to say it crashed in 1965 in a linear way? Maybe it launched in 1945 and landed in 1965. Maybe for the pilot inside, the trip took 20 minutes, but on Earth, 20 years had passed. Let's step back and look at the physics again. Is any of this actually possible? We know that rotating magnetic fields can do strange things. Modern physics calls them torsion fields. If you spin a superconductor fast enough, you can theoretically reduce the weight of objects near it. NASA has actually researched this. They have a paper on Podkletenov's gravity shielding. It's controversial, but the math exists. The Nazis were using red mercury. For years, people thought red mercury was a myth, a hoax sold to terrorists. But recently, we found evidence that it might be a real substance, a bolotechnic material. This means it releases massive energy, not by exploding, but by being compressed. If you take a radioactive fluid, pressurize it to thousands of atmospheres, and spin it at 50,000 RPM, you are creating a mini star in a bottle. The crystals in the blood of the victims. That sounds like a biological reaction to intense, high-frequency electromagnetic fields. We know that certain frequencies can cause fluids to coagulate. The goo that the plants turned into? That sounds like cellular breakdown caused by radiation we don't even have a name for yet. The scary part isn't that the Nazis were doing magic. The scary part is that they were doing science that we still don't understand today. They were 70 years ahead of the curve, and Kammler was the one driving it. He wasn't a mad scientist in a movie. He was a project manager. He had deadlines. He had budgets. He had results. The bell wasn't a fantasy, it was an industrial project with a paper trail. The air is still heavy with unanswered questions, and the silence that followed the collapse of the Third Reich is the loudest part of the entire Nazi bell mystery. The greatest secret weapon program in history, a project aimed at manipulating the very fabric of time and space, vanishes without a trace. So where is the Nazi bell, that supposed engine of a new physics and an unspeakable horror? The theories are not just speculation, they are monuments to the deep technological anxiety that followed World War II. The most chilling possibility places the bell far from the reach of the victorious Allies, deep beneath the glacial ice of Antarctica. The rumors are persistent and unnerving that the final desperate evacuation flight, orchestrated by men like Hans Kammler, did not terminate in the relatively accessible ports of South America. Instead, it pierced the veil of secrecy to land at a clandestine base in Neuschwanstein, the vast frigid territory claimed by Germany. The bell, perhaps too large or too dangerous to be transported back into the heart of the collapsing Reich, was allegedly entombed there, a silent,
frozen sentinel of a failed empire, waiting for a time when its ideology might once again be thawed. The trail of the bell may, alternatively, have led directly into the heart of the victor's secret programs. If the infamous Kecksburg crash of 1965 in Pennsylvania was, as some investigators believe, the bell itself, or a successful flight test of its anti-gravity principles, then the U.S. government secured the ultimate war prize. This scenario paints a picture worthy of myth. The bell is not destroyed, but simply impounded. It now rests inert but intact within the massive, shadowy warehouses of a military installation in Nevada, secured under layers of black budget funding. It's a trophy of the ultimate intelligence coup, sitting in a crate, a silent, humming relic next to artifacts like the Ark of the Covenant, fueling clandestine research programs in advanced propulsion and energy manipulation for decades. Perhaps the machine's disappearance is not a matter of hiding, but of destruction. The man who championed the bell, General Hans Kammler, vanished so utterly that his fate remains one of the war's most enduring puzzles. Was his disappearance an escape, or a final, terrible experiment? In this dark hypothesis, Kammler didn't flee the Allies. He made one last catastrophic attempt to push the bell beyond the boundaries of known physics. He turned the machine on, maximized its terrifying power, seeking to escape not through space, but through reality itself. The result was a catastrophic event that consumed both Kammler and the bell, shearing them out of our four dimensions entirely, a self-engineered implosion into the realm of the impossible. But the truly disturbing option is that the bell never truly vanished. Its physical form may be in the ice or in a hangar, but its knowledge is undeniably here. Look at the timeline of post-war technological advancement, the impossible leap from propeller-driven aircraft to landing on the moon in a mere 20 years. This dramatic acceleration, particularly in fields like stealth technology, drone warfare, and theoretical anti-gravity research, defies conventional scientific progression. It suggests not independent discovery, but privileged access to the teacher's answer key. The Nazi bell and the scientists behind it provided that key. The bell represents the darkest timeline of human scientific discovery. It was an engine of pure, unadulterated knowledge, built on the bones of slaves, fueled by the blood of prisoners, and designed by a moral monster like Kammler. It was science without a soul, technology stripped of all ethics. And that is why the most profoundly disturbing thought persists. What if it worked? What if Kammler didn't just outrun the tanks of the approaching Allies? What if he escaped time itself? The physical evidence still whispers. The former mine complex in Wenceslas, Poland, where the bell, or the fly trap, was housed, remains. One can walk the cold, damp tunnels, stand beneath the concrete ring where the horror was chained, and touch the stone that absorbed the echoes of its power. The enduring mystery is not just historical, but existential. Locals still report that on quiet, moonless nights, a low mechanical hum emanates from deep underground. They say the ground still vibrates. Perhaps it is merely the sound of the wind through the derelict mine shafts, or the natural settling of old stone. Or perhaps, just perhaps, the bell is still down there, waiting, spinning. We cling to the comforting narrative that the monstrous forces of Nazism were definitively defeated in 1945, that the good guys won and the bad guys died. But the very existence and disappearance of the bell suggests a more terrifying reality. The true prize of the war was not territory or gold, it was knowledge. And that knowledge was not destroyed, it merely changed hands. The next time a strange light moves across the night sky, or a hum resonates in your chest that you cannot identify, ask yourself, is it an experimental UFO? Is it a modern military test? Or is it a ghost from 1945, the echo of a machine built to defy the laws of nature and man, reverberating through time? The Nazis built a machine to challenge God, and they paid for it in human blood. But the machine itself, it never surrendered. Our modern world, with all its technological marvels, is built on the unearthed and assimilated secrets of the past. But some secrets refuse to stay buried. They lie dormant, waiting for a single reckless hand to flip the switch again. And when that happens, we may finally discover that the war never truly ended. It just went silent.